What's up, everybody? Welcome to Dissecting Tyrone, episode 2. I'm Jason,
I'm Brandon.
and today we're going to talk about fatherhood, being
Yes,
a
sir.
parent. Man, let's get it started. I mean, what do you want to talk about?
Let's go. I think first and foremost, I think this topic is very important. It's very near and dear to our hearts. And we think that there is a lot of information that we have that we're still learning on the fly that people, just regular dads, can definitely pull from. And hopefully we can build this community and have these type of talks so we raise better sons and put better product out in the community. So
Definitely, man. I don't think there's a subject that I'm more passionate about than being a father. Like, it's the most important thing in my life, honestly, and has been since the day I became a father. Also, I like to point out the fact that there's no instruction manuals with fatherhood. There's no instruction manuals with parenting, period. But, when you're a father, man, you just out here kind of winging it, learning, unless you had a great example to learn from.
Right.
Which, my dad was that's a tough subject because, it's something that was probably the biggest hurt in my life because I've always known my father, but he wasn't active in my life. So, I always say that he didn't, I know him, but he didn't raise me.
right.
But it's hard to kind of talk about and be honest about sometimes because there's a lot of siblings. I have a lot of siblings, and my siblings are very close. And so and they had a different experience with him than I did. So I don't ever really want to talk about things that make them feel some type of way. But it is one of the biggest sources of my hurt is my father.
Right, right. Yeah, so similar with me. So my parents were married and they got divorced when I was maybe like 2 or 3 years old. And my dad, he wasn't around and he had every opportunity to be around. One thing that I do want to do is give the most credit, the most praise to my mom because she definitely held it down. She was a strong black woman and raising a boy in the inner city sometimes is tough, but she definitely held me down. And one of the things that I definitely want to do is give her flowers because regardless of what our situation was with my dad and him just not, for whatever reason, not being around, she always told me, never hate your dad. Never hate your dad. That carried with me. She said at some point when you become a man, you'll be able to talk to him. You'll be able to get the answers that you need. She would always stress that no matter what, even if it was one of those situations where I could remember wanting a relationship with my dad. And I remember maybe my 7th or 8th birthday, he said, yeah, son, I'm coming to pick you up. I'm going to come get you. So, I'm geeked up. I'm happy. And friends are coming up like, hey, it's your birthday. You want to go play? And I was like, no, my dad is coming. So I'm just sitting, waiting on the stairs. Man, I sat on the stairs all day. It was probably like around 7, 8 o'clock, kind of starting getting dark. And my mom, she came outside, was like, hey, son, it's time to come in. And she was like, well, your dad's not coming. And, I mean, it crushed me. But that happened to me multiple times. And it was one of those things, I think I developed thick skin from it. But even with all that being said, she said, don't hate your dad. Like, you'll have your opportunity. So that helped me. And then the last time that I experienced that, it was like, all right, well, cool. If he doesn't come, he doesn't come. It is what it is. So I was able to take that positive energy and, like I said, turn it into something that it was not destructive. So I picked up hobbies. I was big into making model cars. So I channeled that energy into there. And my mom would always check on me. So I think that was key as well, just making sure that my well-being was good, putting her differences aside because she lost a husband through a divorce and she wanted to be married, but it was one of those things that he just wasn't around and wasn't there. And as I got older, I told myself, I said, man, if I ever have a son, I said, I will be nothing like my father. And I actually told him that. And I was off in the military, wrote him this long letter back before you could text, call, whatnot. Actually, text was around, but it was big on the mail. So I ended up writing him this letter, and I think the last thing that I said in there was, if I never hear from you again, you know how I feel. I love you, but at the end of the day, I got to protect me. So he ended up responding. And the funny thing is, over a time period, there was some roller coasters, some ups and downs. But my father recently passed back in December, and we had a phenomenal relationship probably the last 5 years of his life because I was still open and willing to still have that. I wanted that father. regardless of what the situation was. And he opened up. He was able to share some insights and dealing with some mental illnesses, dealing with some other things in his life, which basically put things in perspective for me. It wasn't one of those things where it was an excuse, but it was to gain better understanding. And once I had that, then it was like, all right, cool, we locked in. So, and I still have a great relationship with my mom as well, but having that relationship with a father or father-son figure, I mean, it's invaluable. And I think that's what I want to show for my son moving forward in this world.
It's funny you talked about having that talk with him and having that great relationship, or a better relationship those last few years. My father passed away in 2018. One, I was the second youngest of a lot of kids, and my dad was a lot older. So I want to say he was 44 when I was born. So by the time I became an adult, my dad is in his 70s. Like he's an older man, and my dad didn't have a great understanding of what it really took to be a father, in my opinion, from the few conversations we had about it, which weren't many. But my father was the same thing. Like when my father passed away in 18, I spoke at the funeral, and I told people, I said, he lived long enough to make it right. And what I meant was, even though that was the greatest source of my hurt, so when the years got later and we started working through some things, I don't really want to say working through some things because that makes it sound like we had those conversations like you and your dad had, and we didn't. I wish we did, but we didn't. For me, it was more about me forgiving him and understanding that he didn't have the knowledge or the know-how to be the kind of father that I dreamed him to be. But I forgave him. He really made an effort to be better, and he lived long enough to make it right. And that was my sticking point when I spoke at the funeral, or at the repast, was because I appreciated his effort. And one thing I will say about my father is my father always had a few financial things to him, and I could call him for money any day. Now, he didn't pay child support or anything like that, but if I was like, hey, I need, and I don't care how much it was, it could be $5 or $1,000. If I called my dad and say, hey, I need this amount of money, he was gonna say, woo, JJ, that's a lot. Let me see what I can come up with. Now I know he got it in his pocket,
Right.
but he was gonna say that, but he was gonna always call me. When I call him the next day, call me back tomorrow. I call him the next day. All right, I'll be by, or come by and get it. So he always gave it to me. But that was the extent of the relationship. Like I was talking to somebody the other day, and it was like, I never even like went and had a dinner with my father. I've never ate dinner with my father. Never played catch. Never, got taken, to a ball game, or like never. I remember one time when I was doing music, it was my first time ever on the radio. It was a local radio station. And I was said, Dad, I'm going to be on the radio. I'm going to be on the radio. I was so excited, and he didn't even listen. And I don't think it was any ill intent, but he just forgot. And so those things, really stuck with me as I got older.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I can share some stories like that as well. So I was pretty much the same thing growing up my entire life. I could probably count on one hand with fingers missing, like the time that I actually spent with my dad. But I remember my senior year in high school, so on varsity for football, and he had never came to any of my games since, and I've been playing sports since I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. And I think it might have been a couple weeks before, like a senior night. Him and my uncle just popped up, and I remember he showed up to the game late, and I looked up in the crowd, and I'm like, oh, man, my dad is here, so I'm about to show out. So doing my thing, and I remember halftime, I, looked up in the crowd again, and he was gone. So I'm like, he didn't even last a full two halves. So I ended up, it kind of, crushed me a little bit, but it also made me stronger and turn me into the man that I am today, because again, in the back of my mind, my mom said, don't hate your dad. So I didn't hate them for that. And there were things that I didn't understand. But now as a man, as an adult, I can kind of get okay, if he's dealing with some type of mental illness, his mom passed when he was in the military. His sister, he had a strong bond with her. She passed away, I think maybe a week or two after I was born. She got a chance to see me. So he lost some folks in his life, but me, the 18-year-old me versus maybe the 28-year-old me, I didn't understand that. I was like, man, I want my dad. I'm trying to build this bond, But I think the things that he was going through also were valid. And even though, yeah, you have a son, you have an obligation and commitment, he just wasn't there. He wasn't present. So, and I told him I forgave him. He said we would always say, "Hey, I love you, Dad," and he would say, "I love you, son." So we had that going for us. And then once I became a father, I told him, I said, when my son was born, I said, "Listen, what you did to me," I said, "I will not allow you to do that to my son. So if you're going to be in his life, I'm going to give you all the access that you need. But if you're not going to be in his life, then you just won't know him." So he made every conscious effort to be in my son's life and try to make up for a little lost time. And there were some, like I said, peaks and valleys with that. But overall, he was very, very proud of his grandson, very proud of me. Even up until he passed, like all the nurses just rant and rave. It was like, he talks about you all the time, and family members. So at least I know that I was always on his mind. He truly cared for me. And it was one of those things of getting that understanding of the things that he was dealing with. And like ultimately until he passed.
You know, it's funny that you say that because my father bragged on me a lot too. But if I was around my father, he was kind of, quiet, soft spoken, and I didn't hear those things from him, but I would hear them from other people. Oh, he said this about you, he said that about you. So I think it speaks to the fact that they desire to be those type of fathers that we wanted, that we needed. They just didn't know how, or they had other issues at play. Like one thing with me is I've never had a sip of alcohol in my entire life, not one sip. That's because my dad battled alcoholism. Now, my dad was sober for decades by the time he passed away, but because of his issues with that, and I saw how it affected, I knew how it affected him being present in my life, never did it. But I feel like he had the desire to be there. He just didn't know how. And I think once you kind of step back and life goes on, I think it gets easier and easier to allow that space to be there. So, but at the end of the day, I do look. One thing I've always said is that God doesn't make mistakes. God's never said oops. And I felt like if my father had been in my life the way I wanted him to be, that God couldn't have put the people in my life that taught me to be the man that I wanted to be, and I wouldn't be the same person that I am now. So again, later in life, I learned that there was a blessing in his absence. For you, in what ways do you feel like the issues you had with your father made you a better father?
Oh man, I could echo exactly what you said. So fortunately for me, my mom was intelligent enough and emotionally intelligent enough to know that iron sharpens iron. So she kept me around my grandfather on both sides, my uncles on both sides. The men that would be in my life, if they weren't adding value to me, they weren't in the equation. So I give my mom kudos for doing that, because even though she wasn't a man, she put me around men that taught me how to be men. And even though like our conversations may be different, it was just what I seen. Like it's a lot. You can talk, you can say whatever you need to say, but if you see the actions, then that's gonna rub off, and that's what made me. So I'm very, to your point, I'm very, very thankful that even though he wasn't in my life in that period of time, I had examples of what men were, how they conducted themselves. Man, my mom would take me to dinners where there were senators. She used to work for Douglas County, and she was around a lot of politicians. So I would be at dinners suited and booted at the age of 4. I knew how to hold my silverware. I knew how to hold a conversation, and they're looking at me like, is this a little boy or a little man? But all of that was due to my mom, and then also the men that were around me that were molding me and shaping me in what I am today.
That's important. Having that male image, it's super important, and I think a lot of men need to take that role on a little more, that role of mentorship, because a lot of people think, if it's not my blood, it's not my issue or my concern, or I'll give them some little information here or there, but they don't really take you under their wing. And I think that's important. I didn't have that. I kind of learned how to be a man from, TV. I had a church I used to go to, where the pastor was a strong man, and he talked a lot. So I would get nuggets from the pulpit. God put different people in my life. So mine was kind of like a variety of these different people that would cross my path that I would take little things from. My mom was a phenomenal mom, and one thing I do got to give my dad credit for is he picked good women. My siblings' mom, phenomenal woman. The moment I met her, she made me feel welcome and accepted. As a matter of fact, my father, was married, and you know, everybody didn't know that, and so when I was born and my mom found out he was married and everything, that's part of the reason also why he probably wasn't there because there was other things. But when I finally met my siblings' mom, man, my siblings when they met me, it was like they were raised with me because their mom had told them their whole life, like, you got another brother and that's your brother and you love him and you love him. And my siblings, I mean, rock with me tough. We got like a group chat that we talk to each other all the time in. Like, they couldn't be better people, and that it's a direct result of their mom and my father too. Because again, they had a different experience from my father than I did, but their mom was phenomenal. So kudos to the mothers out there.
Absolutely.
But I have always said a mother cannot be a father, and we have different roles and we have different things that we're supposed to instill and pour into a child to make them whole. And so for me, I feel like my mom did a phenomenal job, but it also made me oversensitive, because I learned manhood from a woman's point of view. So it was kind of like, like sometimes women raise you into being the man that they want you to be, or the man that they wish they had, instead of being the man that a man would have taught you to be. Like a man, like my son called me last night. He had a date with his girlfriend, and he's like, "Dad, women are so indecisive." I told her we were going here. She didn't know where she wanted to go, and then we decided here. And he really likes this girl, and this girl is really a nice, sweet girl. So I have no complaints about that. But I told him, I said, son, give her an option. Let her, ask her where she wants to go. If she says, I don't know, and you make the decision, you stick to your decision. Don't change your mind on that. And that's something small, and a lot of women would probably be like, no, don't listen to that. But it's the truth. Like, you have to be decisive as a man. And again, you're not controlling. So don't say, hey, we're doing this, we're doing that. Give her the option. Talk to her. Try to figure it out together. If you cannot and you make a decision, then you stand on that decision. And I feel like that's advice that comes from a man. My mom would have been like, she would have told me everything to do to appease her and to make everything about, her and how she felt and all these other things. And I just feel like over time, women don't respect men that can't stand on business and stand on the decisions that they make. So I teach my son how to make decisions from a man's point of view. So I think it's very important to have those figures in there when you don't have a man involved.
Yeah, and I would agree as well. It's funny. So I was fortunate as far as getting the emotional side from my mom. I think I got enough emotional side from my mom, but still, she never crossed that boundary into my manhood or what I was developing as a manhood. So I was able to, the way that she ran her household, speak your mind. So I would speak my mind. She would say what she needs to say, and we would listen to each other. So that's what helped me develop better communication skills because I could express myself around her. If I felt a certain type of way, it was a way that I needed to do it, but I got to get that off my chest and be very respectful to her. Like, I mean, she raised me, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir. Basically, anytime I talk to my elders, so always having a level of respect for someone from the jump. But she also said, on the flip side, don't take no shit from nobody because this world is cruel and you got family, you got friends, or people that you just meet out in this world who may not hold the same values or interests that I do. So very thankful that she didn't overstep that boundary with being, I guess, overly emotional. Now, I'll say, and like I said, I love you, Mom, but now it's one of those things. She's my ride or die. She's gonna ride for me. But me as a man, there could be a situation that comes up. She's gonna give it from a woman's point of view, and I'll listen to her, hear her out. But then I'm like, hey, Mom, it's not that serious. It's X, Y, Z. And then she's like, all right, son, yeah, you're right. I guess I was putting a little bit too emotion into it, and it's fine. But I think more logical, and I'm gonna try to say, hey, from a problem solving perspective, it's this, and this. I'm not going to put the emotion into it. I can still be very passionate as a person. I can express my emotions, but to have emotions put forth into everything that we do, and that's the first thing that we land on. When you have men who are raising boys, that's very important because this world will eat you up. Because if you lead on emotions or this is how you feel, or this is what this is, sometimes you get consumed with that and it's going to suck you up. You definitely have to have a soft side to you. And we're not saying you just walk around being hard, but you also have to protect that. And a part of being a provider, a part of being a man is assessing the situation and being able to say, all right, well, I see what it is for this. There's going to be a time where, yeah, I can open up and be vulnerable, be emotional, but then there's going to be a time where I got to take care of business because on the other side, this threat or whatever it is, they don't care anything about what I got going on emotionally, so I'm going to have to meet it head on, and then from there, everything smooths itself out.
But that's why I say, too, it's important to have both because
Right.
the mother is supposed to instill that sensitive, caring, loving side, and the father instills that discipline and that, that protecting side. Like, so that's why I feel like you do need both because God designed it that way. Let me ask you this, since we're talking about fathers, when's your son's birthday?
It's in June coming up. Yeah.
June what?
June 10th.
June 10th, what year?
2011.
All right, so it's June 10th, 2011. First cry. You see him for the first moment. What's going through your mind?
Man, I remember this like it was yesterday. So my wife at the time, she ended up having a C-section, so they had to get him going. His heart rate was up, and I'm a little nervous, but I'll never forget when they showed my son to her. She made it. I think she probably cried. Then they brought him over to me, and they put him in a little, I don't know, not an incubator, but like a little bassinet, whatever it was. And I walked over to him. I put my finger out, and he grabbed my finger, and I said, "I got you, little man. I got you." And I never, and I've always kept true to that. So like that was the first time that he heard my voice. He knew who I was because I'm out talk to him all the time. But when I did that, and I felt his skin on my skin when he grabbed my fingers, it was one of those things. It was the best moment in my life that I can remember.
Man, I didn't have a better moment ever in my life. And I have 4 biological children. I have 3 bonus children too, but I have 4 biological children. And the births of my children, man, was some of the greatest days of my life. But I remember Jason Jr. I used to run around my church. Every woman that was pregnant, I used to run my church. Hey, name your baby Jason. Name your baby Jason. So I was like, my first son's gonna be Jason Jr. Like, and I wanted to be a father so bad. It was so important to me. And my ex actually had a son prior, Michael, who I helped raise. And but having your own and like looking in his eyes and seeing that he has my face and he has my eyes, and I broke down. I lost it. Like I couldn't stop crying, tears of joy, but I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't stop smiling. I was so happy. I even wrote a poem about it. And the poem's called "Be Here," but that was why I wrote it, because a lot of men don't understand that you don't have to get it right every day. You just have to be there. Like there's something powerful about just your presence, just being there, even if you're getting it wrong, but you're doing your best, and you're doing everything out of love. I'm not saying be harmful, but you're doing everything out of love. You're doing your best. You can get it wrong, but as long as you're there to get it wrong, man, it's a crazy thing, And I look back too at just being a father, and I'm like, I'll never understand how men are not in their children's lives. Like, this has been the best part of my life is my children. Watching Nas act just like me, watching Jay, which is my only biological daughter, have my sense of humor, and Jason enjoy. Like, man, it's the best part of my life.
Yeah, I will say, as far as men not being there, I think it's a difference between men not wanting to have anything to do with their kids and circumstances keeping them from their kids. But I will say this to all the fathers, all the mothers out there: at some point, you guys have to sit down and realize this is bigger than you. This is the end goal should be the children, kid, whatever you guys have, to see them to the finish line. And even when they hit the finish line, you're still always going to be there to cheer them on. But to get them to be out in this world, to be very productive human beings, there's splitting images of you. So why, on both sides, men and women, why would you put hurdles or roadblocks to keep children, or especially boys, from their fathers? Because again, it's needed. They need to see, like, oh man, I'm just like him, but he looks a little different, but he got my back. And it's one of those things where it's like, hey, I got you, son. I'm gonna try to walk you through life the best that I can. And now it's gonna be some bumps along the road because nobody has, like you said, nobody has a handbook and nothing is perfect. But if you're trying and you're there, that's what these kids want. Whether your kids play sports or whether they're talented by drawing, playing music, anything, schoolwork, they need that cheerleader to cheer them on to say, well, shoot, my dad, he believes in me so I can conquer the world. Whereas a lot of kids out here, a lot of boys out here lack that confidence, and that carries with them through their adulthood because they truly didn't have that connection or that bond to say, man, like, does my dad really like me? Or like, I want this feeling, but I don't know what it feels like. And then that's where the cycle continues because sometimes it can go one or two ways. It can go the way where a father not being in a boy's life and they're just like their father. And then on the flip side, I was fortunate, you were fortunate. We had mothers just say, hey, this is how it's going to be. They're still raising us and still giving us the guidance or putting us around individuals so we kind of have a sense of, well, this is what this is supposed to be. So now when I have a son or have a daughter, this is how it needs to be.
You know, it's funny you say that. You talk about instilling the confidence in your children. I had a thing that I did with my kids from the day they were born. I mean, from when they could start talking. But they would say, I would have them say, I'm smart, I'm handsome, and I can do all things. And I would say, what are you going to be when you grow up? And they would just say successful. And that was important for me to have them say that and repeat that. And I'd say, what are you? I'm smart, I'm handsome, and I can do all things. What are you going to be when you grow up? Successful. Because even though they didn't know what those words meant, I knew that as they grew into the understanding of those words, they would say, hey, that's what I am. So, you know, they don't know what successful is at 3 or 4 whenever they start talking. But when they get 12, 10, 11, 13, whatever age, and they realize, okay, this is what successful means, that's what I am. And I always said successful instead of picking something because I wanted them to know that anything you do, you're going to be successful at. My son, Jordan, his mom, and shout out to my children's moms. Let me say that too. I got my children's moms are phenomenal moms. And we have no issues, have great co-parenting, and even when there were issues from relationships and things like that, we never played about the kids. Even my last divorce was nasty. But even the judge says, hey, it seems like you guys do the right things when it comes to your daughter. And that's one thing me and my ex don't play about. We don't really talk. We don't really communicate. We're not friends. But when it comes to my daughter, I would never hate somebody more than I love my child. And I think that's what happens a lot of times in relationships where people hate the person more than they love their child to where they can't put that aside to do what's right for their kid. But there's something you said I want to spin back to when you said, you know, basically sometimes people aren't there because of circumstances. What circumstance? Like for me, there's no circumstance on this earth that's going to prevent me from being in my child's life. And I went through, I know some guys are like, I know a brother on Facebook now, man, super good dude, super good father, who's going through hell. And I see him post and he'll be like, I'm ready to give up. You know, I'm like, bro, don't give up. You know, I went through a bad divorce, my first divorce. And before we got to a space where we were cool enough to be, you know, adults and good parents, you know, I thought I was going to have to give up. But I can't. If it means going to court repeatedly, if it means, you know, crying, if it means, you know, suffering, I can't give up because, you know, I have to be here for my kids. So I want to ask you, and from your point of view or your opinion, what situation or circumstance can prevent you from being a father?
So the roadblock that I'm talking about is, and like I said, let me preface this, there are great mothers out there who allow the co-parenting, but at the end of the day, it's a two-way street. Both parents should have equal rights. But I think what happens is sometimes fathers, because I had a bunch of friends that actually went through this, where the courts get involved and maybe they don't have proper representation. Maybe they don't have the funds or the money to be able to hire an attorney to get whatever type of joint custody that they're getting. So they just automatically are just like, man, you know, I don't have it. I don't have the money. Maybe they're not communicating. Maybe they don't have anybody in their corner to help them out. But it's almost in a sense, to your point, they give up because they can't, they're looking at it from maybe a financial aspect, like, I don't know. Or maybe they truly don't know what this process looks like because nobody wants to go through a custody battle. So like when I say roadblocks, that's what I mean. When you have these custody battles, People don't know how to operate. Maybe they have misrepresentation or no representation at all. But it shouldn't stop you from a father from trying. Maybe you hit this roadblock and you say, hey, this is all I can do. And you still want to have support. And that's where I say the people who are experiencing these type of relationships, you got to put your differences aside. And if a father wants to be a father and he is not abusing or being abusive or detriment to that child, you have to start somewhere. And that's where that emotion, if you're still attached or you feel in some type of way because of the relationship is one thing. The relationship with his children is something totally different. And that is what needs to be, the cycle needs to be broken on that. So if a man is out here trying his hardest, he's working, he's trying to see his kids, but he's not seeing his kids due from a court order, or he just doesn't have that representation. That's what I'm referring to with the roadblocks.
Yeah, I get that. And I know I'm going to sound like I'm pro-mom when I say these things, because the women are going to cheer and be like, yeah, tell him, but I do get both sides, because I've been on both sides. I've been in custody battles for my children. I've been where I felt frustrated or I didn't get what I wanted as far as, custody. But I think that, people got to be real with themselves. Like, I see a lot of men that are like, I didn't get joint custody, but they only wanted joint custody because they didn't want to be on child support.
Correct.
They didn't want joint custody because they wanted to be an active father. They wanted joint custody because they didn't want to be on child support. Now, let me say this. I'm against child support for active fathers that live in the same city. If you're not active, or if you don't live in the same city, I don't feel like you have the same expenses that the other parent has. So yeah, you should be paying child support. But if you're an active father in the same city, I have the same expenses at my home that you have at yours. I have to have an extra. I can't live in a studio apartment with 4 kids. I got to have rooms for people. I got to have clothes, TV, TVs, food, electricity. I got the same expenses. I think sometimes my uncle told me one time when I was going through it in my divorce, the first divorce, my uncle said, Jason, he said, you can have your kids 26 hours a day, 9 days a week, pay $1 million a month in child support, and the mom is still going to feel like she does more. And that's true, because she knows her sacrifices. So she looks at it like, she sees what she's sacrificing, and they never feel like the man is sacrificing just as much. And that's not always true. Now, there are some guys out there that don't care or want to drop the kid off and they feel like it. I get all of that. But at the end of the day, like you said, if this man is trying and he wants to be a father, let him be that father. A lot of women sometimes like to play this game of, well, he's not being a father the way I think he should be a father. And they try to prevent that. Or, you're not going to have some other girl around my kid. If y'all not together, you have no say in that.
Absolutely. That's a big problem where people get misconstrued that since it's not their way, it's the highway, right, and you got to get up out the paint.
Right. And you have no right to do that to that child, because that child deserves to have their father. And if you want saying who he's dating or who's around your children, unless they're harmful, let's preface that. If the person is harmful, it's a different ballgame. But if they're not harmful, it's just because I don't know them, then you should have stayed in a relationship, because you don't get to pick that. My ex was dating a guy that I didn't like or care for or want around my child, but I have no say in that. All I can do is say that as a mom, you just make sure you keep control of the situation. Now, if there's ever a situation that involves with my daughter or my son or whatever's brought into it, then you're going to have to see me.
Right.
And I'm not no Billy Bad Butt. I'm not no thug, no gangster. I'm not none of that stuff. But when it comes to my children, you going to have to see me, because I don't play about that. But like you said, the women will get in the way. But I'm like, bro, the courts at minimum. So if you're trying to get joint custody or you're trying to take custody from the mom, you can probably, that's a hard situation. You need an attorney, you need all these things. But if you just like, hey, I want to be in his life, period, take what you can get for now and work on the rest later. The courts will give you 1 day a week and every other weekend, unless something's wrong with you or you're not stable. But they're going to make you pay child support. And I think a lot of men are like, well, she wants the money, but she won't. Yeah, you know what? I don't care what she wants. Man, I'm going to tell you this. A lot of people don't know. My 3 boys, I paid child support from them from the time that I wasn't with their mom. My 2 oldest sons, their mom, actually was like, hey, you know what, we're not doing this, and would give me the child support back and all that stuff because she knows the type of father I am and all that. My youngest son's mom, she still gets it, but it's pennies on the dollar. Like, it's based on money I made back in the day, and she's such a good mom and so good with money. I'd bet that money somewhere in an account for him stacking up. But the point is, I've paid child support. I've never raised my kids as if I pay child support. Like, I hate when guys are like, well, I gave her money. She went to the club. Man, I don't care what she do with the money. Is my child taken care of? Is my child provided for? If my child's taken care of and my child's provided for, then the money went to them. I don't care if she took the check and went straight to the club and rolled it over to the check. She's just replacing the money she spent. But I hate when guys get so caught up in the money, right? I don't care about the money. I can make more money. I cannot make more time with my children.
So I will say I totally agree with you when you are referring to the father's intentions, because the father's intentions are going to dictate how that good karma going to come back to you or the bad karma is going to come back to you. If you go in a situation to where you're like, well, man, I got to pay this or I got to pay that, and then now you start getting into your own head, and then you like, well, shoot, if I can't get the kid, I ain't paying nothing. So now it's like, okay, so you're not going to give your child the support or efforts that he needs. Unfortunately, like, it didn't work out between you and the mom. So as an adult, this kid needs to go out in this world and at least have the necessary tools to be successful. And on the flip side, a father like me, I'm a scorched earth. I need my son 24/7, the best that I can have him. But fortunately, like for my situation, we have joint custody after we got divorced. And it's funny because, I see my son practically almost every day. But as far as like from a support perspective, a child support perspective, I don't look at any type of money like that. Hell, I've been providing support for my son since day one, even before that.
Day one.
So it's like, well, shoot, if he needs something, I'm going to take care of it. If his grades are good and his attitude is positive, you don't have to worry about anything. Now, you start slipping or you need to come see me, we're going to have a conversation and maybe some things get pulled back. But the bare necessity that he needs, a roof over his head, food in his stomach, great education, all these other things that he needs, he's going to have that until I don't have breath in my life. I'm going to find a way to make it happen, whether I'm up, whether I'm down, and everything in between. But I definitely do want to stress, if you are a father and you're looking at it from a financial perspective, you got to get that up out your head, because, again, it's not about the dollar amount. It's about spending the most time that you can. And then when you spend time with your kid, are you just letting them go in the room and just playing video games, or are you actually being a father to these children and talking to them, figuring out, okay, well, I know the pitfalls that I had or my dad had. Let me reverse that and let me start opening it up and talking to these kids so they don't fall victim to that, because you're just going to keep this cycle going over and over and over. And if we want to stop it, you have to put your foot in the ground at some point in time and make a change. But again, on both sides, from a relationship perspective, y'all hash that out. But when it comes to the kids, do the best that you can to make sure that both parents equally know their kids. They have the love, they know that they're loved, and they have the support that they need for these children.
I agree 1,000%. And one thing that I know both of us are big on, don't, like you said, don't make it just about money. It's not just about giving your kids Jordans and clothes and shoes and all this other stuff too, man. So some men I know feel like, well, I don't have a lot to give. You have everything to give if you just give yourself. Your words, your wisdom, your knowledge. Like, being a father is about guidance. Like I tell people all the time, there's nothing more powerful than God. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Nothing more powerful than God, right? And out of everything God could have been called, he chose to be called our Father. That's how important the role of fatherhood is, that God said he's a father. And that to me, that's absolutely amazing. And I think when you think about that, it really puts it in perspective. Like, man, this ain't no joke. Like, I got to take this seriously. Like, these human beings depend on me for protection, for wisdom, for guidance. My youngest son, Jordan, he acts tough with me. Like when he's with me, he like, Dad, I'm deadlifting 300 pounds. Like he acts tough. When he's with his mom, he's softer, because him and his mom have a phenomenal relationship. So he's softer. So she tells me the things that he says. So I'm talking to Jordan, and Jordan be fearful or something, and I'm like, no, son, listen, we got to conquer fears. We got to do, whatever the lesson is that I'm trying to teach him or explain to him. And he'll be like, okay, Dad. But then he'll go to his mom and he'll be like, when my dad talks to me, like, I feel like I can do anything. Like, I feel motivated. Like, I feel like I can do anything. Nas is always telling me, Dad, all right, Dad, you got some wisdom, Dad. Okay, Dad, you be dropping gems. And Jason, who I thought Jason, I thought it was hopeless for Jason because, he wouldn't listen to nothing. I'd be like, the sky blue. I don't know, Dad. My friends say it's purple. I like, boy, the sky is blue. No, I don't know, Dad. My friends say it's purple. And then we look it up or Google it, and he'd be like, oh, okay, Dad, you was right. So, but he would never listen. Jason, something clicked at his going into his senior year in high school, and now, man, Jason will call me and be like, Dad, I'm thinking about doing X, Y, Z. What do you think? Like, he'll come to me for the guidance that I all the years I thought he wasn't listening, and he was soaking it up and realized, okay, my dad got my best interests at heart. So I encourage, fathers out there, just keep showing up, just keep being there. If you ain't got no money, don't worry about it. Keep doing it. If you get put on child support, don't worry about it. Keep doing it. Just keep doing the role. Keep being active. And for me, again, child support, my big thing was the reason why I still raised my children is if I never paid a dime was because I wanted my children to see me provide for them. I didn't want it to be like, hey, go, I'll pay your mom. Go ask your mom. That was nonsense to me. I want my son to see me get his school clothes, get that. And I suffered. When I used to be a prison guard. When I worked at the prison, man, by the time they took child support and all these other things, I was getting $400 every 2 weeks. My car note alone was more than that. My apartment was more than that. I had a temporary order until the divorce was finalized. So I had my kids every day after work, and I had them every other weekend. So I had them from 2 to 6 or whatever every day, and then I had every other weekend. I couldn't get another job because if I got another job, I'd have money, but I wouldn't have time with my children. So I'm at the prison at work. I get a call from the front desk. Hey, bro, your car is getting repossessed in the parking lot right now. And I had a Dodge Magnum on 24-inch rims, TV screens. Like, it was laid out. And my son, Jason, used to be like, Dad, this is my car. This is going to be my car. And so I sat there and I said, well, it's nothing I can do about it because I couldn't pay all those bills and have the time with my children. The time was more important to me. So a friend of mine at work, Arhus, looked out for me tough. And he gave me this, sold me this car with no money because I was poor. And it was kind of rusted out and it was raggedy and had this loud, you heard it from a mile away. And I remember I picked Jason up from school that day and he looked and he's like, whose car is this? And I said, well, it's going to be your car. He's like, nah, I don't want this. And we're just driving down the street and he randomly says, who would steal this? And it broke my heart. But that car allowed me to be a father because I didn't have to work. That car had no car note, no car payment to it. I didn't have to work another job and not be present. And that was the most important thing to me. So it as much as I loved my Magnum, my rims, my teeth, like as much as I loved it, it was not more important than being a father. And I had weekends to where I would switch weekends with my kid's mom and I'd make up something that I had to do, but it's because I didn't have the money to feed them. I didn't have the money to feed them. But I just kept going and kept going. And eventually, I got a better job. The relationship with the mom got better. And like I said, like me and my children have a phenomenal relationship. I have a good relationship with the kids' moms. Like there's no issues, but I kept fighting. So I encourage any brother out there listening, keep fighting. They're worth it. Your children are worth it. It's a benefit to your life.
And I think for me, some of my greatest joys in just raising BJ, my son BJ, is just the bond that I've developed with him since birth. And I would encourage fathers as well to build a bond with him. If you have a hobby, chances are if they're seeing you at a young age, that's going to be their hobby because they want to hang with dad. Yep. So one of the things that was very important to me was, I believe my son was about to be 2 years old, and I'm a big golfer. And I was like, man, let me take him out here and play some golf. And it was funny because I got him this little small Fisher-Price golf set, and we were in the yard just kind of hitting the balls back and forth. And then he kind of started getting the swing of it. He started hitting it over the gate. I'm like, dude, you're not even 2 years old yet. And I was like, I think I got something here. But that was like the first introduction to like sports outside of like just throwing the football when he was in his diapers. But I knew, I was like, man, I was very athletic. I love sports. So I said, okay, I think he may have this passion for sports as well. So I made it a point. I used to officiate basketball from the highest level of 3-man basketball all the way down to like Little League. And I remember I had been doing that for about 7 years, and my son was probably turning around, he was around 3 years old. So I said, all right, you know what? Let me just go ahead and back off from that and just focus on him, because any sport that he wants to do, I'm going to be behind him. So we started off with basketball, where the basketball was bigger than his whole body, but I started coaching, and I was like, man, I kind of like this. So I would coach him and coach some little kids and just see him progress. And now it's one of those things, I just stopped coaching him, and now I just want to sit back and just watch him, but just seeing the man that he is. And I remember the frustrations between us. It was just like, man, like I'm trying to teach him something, trying to do something. I'm like, maybe I'm not saying it right, maybe, but it boiled down to when he was ready to be receptive. And I'm noticing now, him being 13, the words that I say, whether it's on, off the court, whether it's about his education, is finally starting to click. So I feel like, man, I'm kind of in this sweet spot. Like, yeah, you have the teenage woes, but it's more so now to where when I'm speaking from experience. I'm being intentional on like, hey, son, you need to make sure that you take care of this, or you need to make sure that you do this a certain way. But then I'm also giving him his individuality to take this in and do it in his way. It doesn't have to be straight up and down like I did it, but if you take it and you remix it, as long as you're doing right, I'm going to support you 1,000% in your endeavors and your journeys. And it's funny now, he's talking about, and I put that little bug in his ear, but he's talking about he wants to visit, he wants to go on a black college tour. So he wants to go to like North Carolina A&T. He wants to go to Howard. He wants to go to FAMU. So I'm like, all right, man, who do I know at these schools to try to at least let him see what academics looks like, let him see what the football field or basketball or track looks like. So that's what I'm kind of piecing up right now. And it's funny because he's coming to me like, man, I'm interested in this. And he says, well, now he says he wants to be a psychologist for the CIA. So I'm like, all right, cool. And it may change, but just giving him the possibilities to believe like, man, I could do this, I could do that. He learns a little bit about it. Maybe this is not for me, or he learns about it. He's like, okay, I like it. I want to explore it a lot more. But it's very, very important, fathers, to, if you have some type of passion, show that. Show your children that, because it's going to rub off on them. They may not do the same exact thing that you're doing, but just the love and the passion for something is going to stick in the back of their mind, so they know what it looks like once they find out what their passion is.
I agree 1,000%. Let me say this. With the podcast, we've gotten a lot of good feedback. One of the things that we want to try to do, the first episode was over an hour and 8 minutes. We want to keep them down to about 45 minutes or so. And we hit that mark now. We are not going to rush through this. I promise you that. So, but what we are going to do is we're going to do a part 2. You know, they got TED Talk, right? Well, Brandon was like, let's do Dad Talk. So that's what this is. This is Dad Talk. And we're going to go ahead and end this today. But I want you guys to tune in every other Thursday is when we drop new episodes. Our next episode is just going to be a continuation because we're not rushing through this. This is an important subject and topic for our community. So we're going to do part 2 of Dad Talk. Make sure y'all there.
Peace.
Peace.